Thank you for joining me back here on the show to jump into our continued series over the last few days, talking over each division and going through each of the teams in those divisions on answering my biggest question with each roster and how they've progressed, what they've addressed, and what they still need to address heading into 2024. And this time, we're talking about the AFC East. A lot going in there, a lot of questions, and yeah, it's just basically an interesting division just compared to last year and all the changes that we've seen and that we are expected to see going into this year. So we're going to start off with one of the more polarizing, one of the more questioned, and just a lot of expectations on the New York Jets that I wanted to start off with. And it pretty much just writes itself with the question, how quickly can they just get Haason Reddick on the field? At this point, getting him near the facility would be a win for this New York Jets team because of how everything's developed and how everything has sort of crumbled for the Jets at this point, because you traded for this guy 4 months ago, but now you still haven't gotten one of the better pass rushers on your team on the field practicing with this new squad because of a contract dispute that both sides can't seem to agree on at any point over the last few months that this has been going on. And, I'm really interested to see what's the Jets' timeline and sort of deadline with how far they'll go, how far they'll wait before, it comes to a point where I think they should go and start thinking about, just getting it over with, honestly, because there's so much pressure on this team. Obviously, like I talked about, I think yesterday or Monday, how, you don't have time to mess around right now. You don't have time to sit on your high horse and think like, oh, who is Haason Reddick? Who does he think he is talking to the Jets? Like, we're just gonna, give in to his contract demands. They're not anywhere near that situation to kind of, hold their head above the request from Haason Reddick. He, maybe last year wasn't his best year, but before that, why he earned this new contract with the Philadelphia Eagles a few years ago was because he was one of the better pass rushers, and he can add a lot to this already impressive defense. I think the Jets just need to come to a, compromise with Haason Reddick and meet with him again. And if he truly won't show up until he has a new contract, then I don't see really the big deal in just going over with him and coming to that compromise, like I said, and just getting him back on the team and back with this team, because everything that anybody ever talks about with the Jets is not related to football, it seems. It's always about Rodgers and what he's doing off the field, what he says, the disputes that they have between teammates, Haason Reddick not being on the field, and nobody talks about how they're getting actually better on the football field overall. So to just put this to bed and focus on football for the New York Jets, I think will be a win. And that's something that they have to do as soon as possible, in my opinion, for them to just get it out of the way, to stop having all these extra narratives around their team and just focus on football. But that's the New York Jets. The next team is the reigning divisional champs, the Buffalo Bills. All the talk about their number one option, could it not actually be a wide receiver, but will Dalton Kincaid, their second-year tight end, become the go-to option for Josh Allen? Because you look at Dalton Kincaid last year, and as a rookie, he was second on the team in targets, second in receptions, but he only had 2 touchdowns, which was the only downside of it. But you get rid of Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs, which accounted for 240 targets and over 1,800 receiving yards, and you take that completely away. Now you have a bunch of unknowns with this receiver room. You bring in Curtis Samuel, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, you draft Keon Coleman, you still have Khalil Shakir, but it's nothing that Josh Allen really has any prior real chemistry with, not to the level of Stephon Diggs. And it looked like last year, the way that this chemistry was building with Dalton Kincaid and just how impressive he was right out of the gate as a rookie, now that you have all these extra receptions, targets, and just yards basically sitting out there, of course a lot of it's going to go to the wide receivers, ideally, to make this Buffalo Bills team, a very good team. But I feel like a lot of it could go to Dalton Kincaid, and I don't think it would be too foreign to maybe start thinking of Dalton Kincaid as being in a position that you base your team around him and trying to get him the ball as much as possible. And I'm not comparing him to Travis Kelce already, but, it has worked for the Kansas City Chiefs with Kelsey and maybe not having the stars around them at receiver, but the Chiefs have done pretty well for themselves, and I think the closest thing that you can get to Patrick Mahomes, obviously being the biggest outlier in all of this, could be Josh Allen and all the battles that they've had, how close Josh Allen has gotten to beat Patrick Mahomes, maybe copying their script a little bit with having a great tight end and just having all right receivers around them could be the way to go for the Buffalo Bills. And Kincaid has already that trust with Josh Allen. He is one of the guys that is there over the course of just from last year to this year. So you already have that chemistry there with him. And it makes sense to lean on him just because they want to use the run game a little bit more. I think that's a big emphasis for their new offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, from last year when he took the job. It seems like they want to get James Cook more involved in that way. Not only can you take advantage of Josh Allen's legs and running ability, but off of the play action, off of the heavy sets that you're lined up with, Dalton Kincaid could really be set up to be successful for this offense. And I don't think it should be ruled out or scuffed at that Dalton Kincaid could be the number one wide receiver or just receiving option for this team. I think it's a good alternative in kind of switching it around from the typical having to be a wide receiver, your go-to guy. Dalton Kincaid is definitely talented enough. He already had a bunch of receptions and targets last year. To build off of that, getting better from last year to this year, I think it's a very viable option, and I think it is very likely to happen for the Buffalo Bills. But moving on to the next team, in saying that, we're going to go to the Miami Dolphins. Close to winning the division, they choked it away, losing to the Buffalo Bills, but now they improved a little bit on defense. But what will that defense actually look like with all of these changes, being brought up just this year? They did lose some of their biggest guys like Xavier Howard, Christian Wilkins, Alex Van Ginkel, Jerome Baker, Raekwon Davis, a lot of their main pieces and cornerstones of their defense, but they did bring in some guys that I thought were able to replace, to some extent, some of the pieces that they lost in Jordan Brooks, Chop Robinson that they drafted, Jordan Poyer adding some experience back there, Kendall Fuller in the secondary, Neville Gallimore along that defensive line, and Anthony Walker as well to go along with the potential returns, or the eventual returns, I should say, of Bradley Chubb on that edge and Jalen Phillips making his way back from that Achilles injury. And, the injuries are the biggest thing with this team, but now that they're incorporating new pieces into this defense, it looks like the offense isn't going to be a problem. They still have arguably one of the more explosive offenses in the NFL. So it really comes down to this defense, how they all acclimate to each other, how they all get on the same page. And if they are all playing cohesively, you get Chubb and Jalen Phillips fully recovered from their injuries. You don't have to be a top 5, top 3 defense, but you have to have timely stops. You have to be almost like a clutch defense, for a lack of a better terms, to just make the stops that you need to make. If you give up 20 points, 21 points, this Miami Dolphins offense is capable of putting up at least 24 each game. I'm very confident in saying that. So knowing that that offense has that potential, if you could just make 1 or 2 stops when you have to do it, I think that'll be enough, and it'll improve this Dolphins team in 2024 and maybe get them over the hump and win this division. I think they're not being given enough credit to win this division. That's just me. I like the pieces that they add, and I think they have a good team. So if they could figure out this defense sooner rather than later, it'll go a long way for them in hopefully winning this division this year while they were so close last year. And then the last team I wanted to get to, obviously, is the New England Patriots, and more of a just general thought with them. What sort of, positives, what sort of good things can you build upon this year to just take with you next year? Because I don't think it's dissing the Patriots in any way to expect them to just not be very good at all this year. They could be in that conversation to potentially be a bottom 3 team in regards to the NFL draft and where they're selecting. That's just the way it is right now. That's probably what all teams have to go through when you're going through a full rebuild, getting rid of the general manager, head coach, bringing in a bunch of new players, young players, and establishing what Gerard Mayo wants to be a new culture, a new identity with this team, doing it his way, and, still having those Patriot mannerisms. What sort of positives can you take away in a lot of and a lot of negatives that you could be faced with this year. You know, a lot of struggles, some bad losses potentially, but what silver lining, what positive things can you take from week to week, and maybe just from month to month, and then growing on that after this year? Hopefully they keep Gerard Mayo, not just for 1 year, because that wouldn't be fair at all with the team that he has. So hopefully they keep Gerard Mayo around. Hopefully they can find some positives and build upon that, show some improvement here or there. Again, not having to win 8, 9 games or anything like that, but being, you know, a team that wins 4 games, 5 games, and are still competitive, finding the positives in all of that, and being able to carry that on to next year, because they do have some exciting parts already to this team, to their credit. You know, Kyle Duggar, Jabril Peppers, Christian Gonzalez, Josh Uche, and then on the offensive side, their wide receivers have been looking good just based on the reports in training camp. They have something to carry on to already into next year. Finding some more positives that you were just not expecting this year could go a long way, and I'm excited to see that. Again, they're probably not going to be in the race for a division or a playoff spot or anything like that, but it's a long game for the Patriots that they're playing now. They're not the dynasty that we are so accustomed to seeing, but, you know, that's all right. You know, some things come to an end, and the Patriots are just at that stage of their progression. They have to pick themselves up and start all over. So I'm excited to see it. I like what Gerard Mayo's doing, and if they could do that, I have confidence in them over the next 2 to 3 years that they could get back to being pretty competitive in the AFC. But that's pretty much it. That's the AFC East. Some of the questions I have for these teams in this division. But we have one more topic to talk about, just briefly going over what Will Levis said on this new look Titans team and the expectations that I have for Will Levis to get this Titans team to a place where I expect them to be based on all the changes that they made this offseason. We're going to get to that quickly after this quick break.